What's going on, everybody? Jack here with another episode of The Big and Bold. Unfortunately, I'm a little under the weather, so my voice sounds a little funny today, but I wanted to talk about Scott Frost and Nebraska and their recent loss to Northwestern while it was still fresh, and before we got into those big Week 1 games that we have coming up in a few days. Everybody's talking about it. Nebraska gets upset in Dublin, Ireland to Northwestern, losing 31-28. As like an 11-point favorite to Northwestern. This game is a shock to some people. To me, I wasn't all that surprised. It reminded me a lot of their season opener last year to Illinois, where they came out as the favorite to Illinois and dropped that game as well to a first-year head coach in Brett Bielema. But I'm going to talk about how the game went, how we got to this point, why Nebraska football has failed under Scott Frost, and what this season might look for them moving forward. Everyone's talking about he's going to get fired this year. That is definitely likely. I think the only reason he's gotten a fifth year with the program is because he was the last quarterback in Nebraska to win a national championship. And you hate to fire a guy like that. But his back was up against the wall heading into 2022. They really wanted to give him one last shot to succeed. And off to a terrible start. This is not good for Nebraska. Scott Frost may not finish the season. You know, heading into last year, Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh had his back up against the wall too. He was coming off of a terrible 2-4 season with the COVID year. He had a lot to prove. You know, another head coach there, former quarterback at the University of Michigan. But we had seen glimpses of success in Michigan for Jim Harbaugh and wins, and we haven't seen anything to indicate that Scott Frost will succeed in Nebraska. He's in his fifth year. He's got a record of 15-30 without a win against a top 25 team. I was calling for him to be fired after 2021 when they went 3-9 and lost all those one-score games because I had been following Nebraska and I knew that he was losing one-score games before 2021, just not that many. They're in a very rare spot historically with the number of one-score losses at Nebraska. But you go year by year. In 2018, when they went 4-8, 5 of those losses were by one score, 8 points or less. 2019, 5-7, 4 games by 8 points or less. 2020, in an 8-game season, 3 of their 5 losses, 8 points or less. And then, of course, in 2021, 8 of their 9 losses were by 8 points or less, with that 9th loss by 9 points to Ohio State. It's insane how many one-score losses they've had. That's 21 out of his 30 losses by a score or less. That, to me, is a systemic issue. Like, when you're recruiting at the level that Nebraska has been recruiting with Scott Frost, and you make changes to the roster and the coaching staff, and now even quarterback, and you're still losing these one-score losses, that, to me, is a systemic problem because of Scott Frost. This is all on Scott Frost, and that they're now the embarrassment of the Big Ten. Like, I don't doubt that they're better than Rutgers, or they could be better than Illinois or Indiana this year. But the fact of the matter is that the expectation for this program is higher than going, 3, 4, 5 wins in a season with a bunch of one-score losses. I mean, they didn't want to make a move after the COVID year in 2020, so they gave him 2021, and he went 3-9. But because of a bunch of one-score losses, they were hoping that something would change. Well, guess what? Nothing's changed. And I could have told you that from the get-go. This is why I bet the under for Nebraska's win total, because I haven't even seen Scott Frost hit 6 wins. There's no way I saw them hitting 8 wins. So when you look at the game itself, the real concern for me, it wasn't so much the onside kick. Like, they were up 14. They wanted to keep the ball out of Northwestern's hands and try to build that lead. But you already had a 2-touchdown lead, so I thought the onside kick was a little strange. The real problem here is over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground for Northwestern. And they let Ryan Helinski look really good in that game. Okay, Ryan Helinski, the quarterback for Northwestern, threw for 978 yards last year. In this game alone, he threw for 314. Okay, like, they allowed Ryan Helinski to look like a stud. And they got manhandled on the ground. They gave up not one, but 2 14-point leads in this game. There are more things to be upset about than just the failed onside kick to try and, I guess, go from a 2-touchdown to 3-touchdown lead. And this is where I start to look at the why Nebraska has failed under Scott Frost and why he is well on his way to getting fired. And he should have been fired already. And it's because that onside kick, to me, is a sign of a lack of confidence in your team, while a lot of the very conservative play calling that Pat Fitzgerald had for Northwestern is a sign of a lot of confidence he had in his team. Nebraska got outcoached. They've been outcoached consistently. They out-recruit a majority of the teams in the Big Ten West. They come in roughly at like 25th in recruiting if you look at since Scott Frost arrived at Nebraska. And that is where you start to see the problem with this program and the direction they've gone in, is that you look at the successful teams in the Big Ten West: Iowa, Wisconsin, Northwestern, even now Minnesota. You know, what they have is a strong culture, strong offensive and defensive line play. They like to run the football. They're coached with confidence and discipline. They don't make a lot of mistakes. That is Big Ten West football. Nebraska, since Scott Frost arrived, has not been that. I understand trying to implement his system and his way of coaching into this program, but it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked since he showed up, and now in year 5, it hasn't worked. And when you take into consideration the fact that Bo Pelini was fired after his 7th season, and he never won less than 9 games, meanwhile Scott Frost is in year 5, and he hasn't even had a winning season, it's a kind of a good indicator of where this Nebraska program is at right now. Now, moving forward the rest of the season, they're going to win their next 2 games. If they lose one of those, he's probably going to get fired within the next couple weeks. But they should win their next 2 games. I don't think they're going to beat Oklahoma. I understood the optimism with maybe being able to take down Oklahoma this year because of Oklahoma bringing in a new head coach and a lot of movement in and out with the transfer portal. But we can't use last year's very close game against Oklahoma on the road to justify them potentially beating Oklahoma this year, because they beat Northwestern last year 56-7, and this season they just lost 31-28. So last year only means so much. But I don't think they're going to beat Oklahoma. I see them winning Indiana and Rutgers. Of course, they could lose one of those games, but I think they'll beat Indiana and Rutgers, and they'll be sitting at 4-2. And a lot is going to be riding on that game against Purdue. A lot. Because if they go to 5-2, now you've got Illinois, which is another very winnable game, and you go up all the way to 6-2, possibly jumping into the top 25, you've turned your season completely around. But if they lose to Oklahoma and they lose to Purdue or Indiana or Rutgers or whatever, they're in trouble. Because their last 4 games of the season, you got Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa. And I don't think they're winning any of those games. Heading into the year, I thought they might be able to pull off one of those and hit like a 6-6, maybe 7-5 at best. But right now, I see them sitting at 5-7 to finish the year, and Scott Frost is going to be fired, potentially in the last month of the season if he makes it there. And I feel bad for Nebraska, and I feel bad for Scott Frost, because the guy goes 13-0 in his second year at UCF, and he gets to coach at his alma mater and try to steer the ship in the right direction, and it just hasn't worked. Like, even when they bring in good recruiting classes, they're not able to retain a lot of that talent because of the transfer portal. And they lose these one-score games because of the same mistakes. Bad turnovers, issues on special teams, blown plays on defense. Like, they replaced their coaches and they brought in a new quarterback. They said, hey, we can't blame Adrian Martinez anymore. And then Casey Thompson goes out there and makes some fantastic plays. But just like Adrian Martinez, he has some bad time turnovers that cost them the game. And again, no matter what personnel they're running or the coaches they have, he's the consistent denominator for why Nebraska is what it is still. Personally, I think that they're going to have to go out and attract someone from the Big Ten. I think that that would be a good place to start looking with your coaching search. Like, ideal candidate, I know it's not going to happen, but Jim Leonard, the defense coordinator for Wisconsin, would be an incredible hire. I don't think they're going to be able to pull him from Wisconsin. I don't know if anybody is. But that's kind of what I'm getting at here, is that they need to bring in a coach that's going to build the identity of this program and that's going to develop a stronger culture. So that's the way I see it. That's the way how I see the game. That's how I see it with Scott Frost. Again, it's unfortunate. I feel bad for the guy in the program. But when you keep falling to the same problems year after year and game after game, there's nothing anyone can do for you except for yourself, right? Nebraska's going to have to make a tough call. Let me know in the comments when you think this guy gets fired, right? Because he's getting fired. I don't see a way that he turns this around. Would it be an incredible story if he manages to finish with like 7 wins this year? Absolutely. He's got a big test against Oklahoma to try and do it. However, I'm not going to be predicting that he does, but it's in the realm of possibility. It's not impossible, right? Let me know how you think the rest of the year goes for Nebraska, what their final record is going to be. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. It helps grow my channel. And keep an eye out in the future for my upcoming video talking about the results from week 1 of college football, which has some fantastic games like Oregon, Georgia, Notre Dame, Ohio State. Like I said, thanks for listening, everybody.